this is a question that many companies have, and going the best of breed and deal with the integration yourself, or going best of platform, which may or may not necessarily be best of breed. Where do you fall on that discussion point? Because, by the way, I've heard this endlessly, and I've heard this kind of the same arguments all the time.
I think best of platform doesn't really work in the real world unless you have an extremely simplified environment where you only have like one type of device and you're buying all of your SaaS solutions from a single vendor and you have that all consolidated together. And even then you're kind of trusting the fox to guard the hen house. So I think that too many tools is definitely a problem. So you need to reach a middle ground there. I
think the most frustrating complexity is really just the ever change of, what's the biggest threat today. I find that today we're, looking at one security gap. And so we look at tooling to address that and to be able to detect that. And, tomorrow it's something else. And so it's this constant renewing of your toolbox to keep up with the threats.
That seems to be the general strategy that most organizations have today, right? Which is to just keep building and keep building and keep building and adopting more and more technology. And eventually you end up with legacy technology that nobody is maybe touched in years, and nobody quite understands how it works anymore, or what it, what value it is or isn't adding into your environment.
How do you know how effective my configurations are today versus a year, 2 years from now? Sonja, what do you do to understand that and also to avoid the default configuration problem that most have?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because it kind of comes back to that governance aspect of, having a routine check of configuration. The first being when you install it, you don't leave the configuration as is. So, step number one. And then just routinely, whether it's, every 6 months or once a year, whatever your increment is, checking that configuration and saying, is this right for our environment? Because the environment changes.
Whether you like it or not, the way that your customers are working is moving to the 21st century. You're adopting new tools, and your data is in the cloud these days there, and people are working, from anywhere, using networks that you don't manage and control. So even if you haven't adopted any security tools, your environment is automatically complex, and there's security capabilities built into those tools. But then there's also, the more that you've buried your head in the sand, the less likely that you're actually, configured proper policies, or that you have control over, the rapid adoption of, Office 365 or Google Workspaces in your environment.
Every environment is, regardless of how complex or how simple, the security aspect is very complex if you haven't elevated your staff to the right level. I mean, if you've got Charlie Brown trying to configure a firewall, that's pretty complex. A lot of policy can be pushed through automation. So, it may be fairly quick and simple, but I think the toughest piece is really around timing, because you don't want to impact your users negatively. And then around the communication aspect, communicating out, hey, we're making this policy change here in the written policy. I need you to make it now in the tool configuration policy.
XDR ultimately is a strategy of an interwoven connection of tools that all communicate with each other in such a way that allows you to obfuscate some of the complexity by bringing this data together. So I think it's definitely an important part of the future of cybersecurity, and I think it's something that's basically, it's a market that's born out of the complexity of all of these tools that people are using today.
Hello, welcome to the Department of Yes, where no request is ever rejected.
Just buy all the tools. Don't worry about configuring or using them, just so long as you check the box on your assessments, which, by the way, teasing what the positive reason of using this. I'll start with you, Sonja. Why do you want to do this?
Because as a CISO, then I can say, I've got it all. whatever you say I need, I've already got it. I can check the box.
I think it's important that that you understand, obviously, like the impact that the solution is having, both in terms of any, positive value that it's adding, like that one's kind of obvious, but also like what's the drawback to it not being in place in terms of productivity and enablement, and what's the worst case scenario that can happen, as you attempt to sunset the solution, in terms of what it means for your environment.
Yeah, I think for complexity, just make sure that you know your tools and the functions that they bring, and reduce where you can. You don't need multiple tools doing the same thing, and then make sure you're training your staff and that they know how to use those tools.
I think the most important thing is that you implement policies uniformly across across the way that your employees are actually acting today. I think it's critically important that your policies represent that as well. And that you can't just check a box by saying, I have some legacy solution in place that covers, the 10% use case, and say, then I'm good from a compliance perspective. That's not sufficient.